In our previous lesson, we bundled our custom node into a package, our nodes rather, with the whole folder structure set up for us in Dynamo. I did mention the ability to copy our DLL on the fly to the correct folder as we build it, so that's what we're going to do in this lesson. I want to note that creating these copy events for the DLL is optional, but it's very worth doing, so don't skip this lesson. With that in mind, we are looking at post-build events. What this does is it enables easy distribution of our DLLs, so it copies them to an output path for us to be able to publish updates very easily. Post-build events can be confusing, so if you Google search Visual Studio post-build events, you're going to find a whole slew of topics about how to build them and all this code that you need to write with very little guidance. Microsoft's website does have quite a bit of guidance, but Visual Studio helps you along with this quite a bit, and they can start to get really long, so that's another thing to keep in mind. I have some build events for Revit plugins that copy DLLs, create installers, sign code, all this crazy stuff. For Dynamo packages, it's a little bit simpler, so we're going to build one from scratch. On the screen is what we're going to build. This goes into the properties of our Visual Studio project, and don't let it scare you because I'll show you an easy way to build this in this lesson. So what we're going to go ahead and do is we'll jump into Visual Studio and we'll get this thing created. All right, so we're in Visual Studio in our code, so we're good to go from this point of view. We're not going to write any actual code in this lesson, but we are going to go to the properties of our Visual Studio project. In this case, we do have a build events tab that we haven't looked at quite yet. Let's go ahead and go to that, and we will see that we have a pre-build event and a post-build event. Post-build is where we copy files after we've built them. So that's where all this happens. So that's where we're going to start. The default command to make this happen is copy/uppercase Y. Y is the letter Y is telling it to overwrite a file if the one you're building is newer. So copy/Y. That's going to be one of the main things we just have to know. Truthfully, once again, this is something I copy between project and project, so don't let it stress you out. In this case, we're going to go ahead and edit it and click on macros. So Visual Studio offers a whole list of macros that you can use in this dialog. So I've done this before to where I edited it all right in this dialog right here. This macros dialog is huge though because it tells you pretty much anything you can use and it previews what the value is for you, which is really slick. It's really nice to have. So in this case, we want to copy our DLL. So let me make this wider so that way we can see it all. And we want to copy our Zero Touch Unraveled DLL to our Dynamo project folder. If we look through here, we will see this target path right here. So we see target path, release, Zero Touch Unraveled DLL. So in this case, that's going to be the DLL that I want to copy. So I can go ahead and click on insert. That inserts that variable for me that automatically pulls that data. Really cool. It's really a quick way to do these kind of things. In this case, I want this to live in my packages folder. So let's go ahead and open File Explorer and take a look at that. So in File Explorer, once again, if we go to the navigation bar and type in %appdata%, that'll take us to our roaming app data. We'll go to Dynamo, Dynamo Revit 2.19. We'll go to our packages folder, Zero Touch Unraveled, bin. This is where we want our DLL to end up while we're building our DLL. So that's another thing to keep in mind. Easiest way to do this is just to copy this path from the browser here. So I'll do Control-C on my keyboard. We have to put quotes and we'll go ahead and paste it and we'll close the quote. There are variables down here to automatically find your app data based on the user and all these things. Rhythm actually uses some of that in it. As an entry level, let's just get the folder that we're working in and copy it. So you can expand upon this, and I realize that, but we just want to get this file copying. So I encourage you to look at your post-build events a bit more in the future after this course to be able to elaborate on them a bit. Once again, Rhythm includes some bigger examples of this for you to reference. In this case, our bin folder is right there, so we do need to end it with a slash, so we'll go ahead and do that. And we want to automatically give it a file name. So this first part, TargetPath, has a file name. The second part is just a folder name at this point. So we do want to give it a file name. If we look through our list here, we will see that we have a target file name available to us. We'll go ahead and click on that and we'll say insert. It inserted it right where my cursor was, and now we have a target file name available to us. That folder is going to read as all of this folder, and then it will end with zerotouchunraveled.dll. I don't even have to type any of that in. Could you type in that name of that DLL right here yourself? Yes, but this makes it a little more parametric, if you will, which is really nice. The other file that we want to copy on the fly, so we're going to copy this copy command, is our XML. So in this case, this one gets a little more interesting because we need to name the XML. So if we scroll through here, we will see that we don't have an XML file in here anywhere for us to use. So that's a bummer. We can't just use one variable. We have to use a couple. And we're going to do that in a different way. So we're going to go ahead and type in a quote, end quote. That way we have a double quote situation going on. We know that our file is going to end with .xml. That is the file, as a reminder, that lives in the same folder for our documentation. We want to copy that each time because as we add nodes, we want the newest version. So keep that in mind. So it's going to end with .xml. If we look through our list, we'll see that we have a target name of Zero Touch Unraveled. If we look at our XML, we can see that it's Zero Touch Unraveled.xml. So we can actually just use this as the name of our .xml. Pasting that in, that will now equal Zero Touch Unraveled.xml, which is pretty nice. So that part's done. Where it lives when we build it still needs to be fixed. So once again, this target path with Zero Touch Unraveled.dll just worked because that is the exact file we're building. We could replace text and all those good things, but we're not going to do that in this lesson. So what we'll do is we'll navigate through and just see if we can find the directory that the XML lives in as well. That directory is this target directory. So that's in our release folder. So the DLL and the XML get put in that release folder. Selecting this variable and clicking insert, we'll put it right next to that target name. So we're already building our file path now at this point, which is really nice. That should be good to go because these variables do include the slashes. If you take a look, it does have the slash at the end, so we don't need to add it. So that's telling which file to copy at this point. Our next step is we do just want to copy over the file to our same location up here, but we're going to do the XML. So what I'm going to do is copy that portion, double quote, and we'll have that as our ending value. So at this point, we're going to copy everything except for that target file name. And that is going to be the destination of this XML file. So now we have told Visual Studio to copy 2 files for us on the fly. Every time we build, good to go. We'll go ahead and click OK. We'll hit save. And a good time to synchronize your changes to GitHub. So we're going to say create post build event. You don't have to type in the lesson number. I'm typing it for your reference, and we'll be good to go from that point of view. So sync those changes to GitHub now. Awesome. And one more thing we're going to do is we have established our versioning system, but we haven't done anything with versioning with our DLLs. Let me show you what that means really quick. So in our roaming folder, if I right click on my DLL and click on properties, so we're going to go ahead and go to properties. We're going to go ahead and right click and say open properties. Under details, I do have a file version of 1.0.0.0. So that's the default version that comes with DLLs. Your dialog might look a little bit different than this, but that's going to be where you look, is in the right click properties of our file. All right, so I went ahead and refreshed my File Explorer to show the file version just in the File Explorer. If you don't see this, that's fine. I did this for this lesson to demonstrate what we're doing. So in this case, back in Visual Studio, we want to add that file version to our DLL. The way you do this is in Properties. If you expand this and go to Assembly Info, you will see all the different data that compiles into our DLL, and you will see a few file versions at the bottom that are defaulted to 1.0.0.0. In this case, we're going to go ahead and type in the version that we use for our package. I'm going to use 2024.1.1, use whatever month you're in. We'll hit save. And now what we're going to do is we're going to build this and see this file update in our packages folder for Dynamo Live. There we go. I'll do build solution, and we should see this show up in our folder for our packages for Dynamo for Revit 2.19. And as you can see, our Zero Touch Unravel DLL is 2024. If you were to update that version, so if I were to come in here and say 1.2 because it's my next build, I'll say build, you will see that increment as well. So it's going to do build solution. Oh, we need to change both. You will see that update in File Explorer in our packages folder now. I do want it to be the first one for now, so I'm going to go ahead and leave that back where it was. And we have 2024.1.1. So with that in mind, we now have our post build event in place. This whole build event is in the lesson notes. You will see that I have in the notes, instead of my name, it will say replace me. Replace it with your username if you copy it. But with that in mind, we are building this from scratch within the Visual Studio. All right, so with that complete, we now have our DLL and our documentation XML copying automatically to the Revit packages folder. As a reminder, if you have Revit open and Dynamo, it owns that DLL, so the copy won't work. So you have to close Revit still at this point, a bummer. But if you're preparing for a release, you'll probably have it closed anyway. You build it in Visual Studio under the release profile and it copies it. We are going to look at building it under the debug profile as well for debugging in the next lesson. So with that in mind, we will look at how to debug our custom nodes a little bit. It's a little bit of a hit or miss in the next lesson with Visual Studio. The specific tool that we're using is called Hot Reload in Visual Studio. It's pretty cool. We'll be able to debug our nodes live. So that copy event is really important for the next lesson. With that in mind, we'll see you in that lesson.